Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
The last year or more has been a tough one for all of us, and the second wave of COVID-19 has been much worse. To help those affected by the pandemic in India, the podcasting community has come together under the hashtag #PodForChange banner to raise funds through an exclusive NGO partner, Give India. Please join PM Power Consulting and the Software People Stories and hashtag #PodForChange as we look to make a positive impact in the lives of those affected by COVID-19. Please visit the link in the description. Someone really needs the help. Imagine yourself surrounded by displays of war games, cockpit simulators, high-speed computers having incredible processing power, and then beetles scurrying around rescuing people using IR sensors. Listening to this narrative by Neeta Trivedi transports you to this realm of her career of 28 plus years working for the Defense Research and Development Organization of India. The sheer complexity, detail, and mission criticality of the systems that she worked on gives you some sense of what goes into creating the arsenal of our defense systems. She's worked with payload processing for unmanned aerial vehicles and was convener of a fascinating set of ideas around micro-air vehicles. Neeta comes from a small town and has grabbed every opportunity that's come her way to become an accomplished scientist. She has seen some extraordinary shifts in software architecture, technology, hardware, embedded systems, and how private players have become partners with defense organizations across the world. Her depth of expertise and experience are insights into discovery, development, and integration of some of the most complex systems. Cycles, clocks, synchronizing buses, managing drifts, and doing her PhD at the prestigious Indian Institute of Science, Neeta's story traverses a trajectory and leaves you knowing that there is more.
Hi, Neeta. Welcome to the Software People Stories. You're probably the first person we have as a guest who is from the public sector doing things of national impact and magnitude. So I'm very eager to refresh my memory as well as for our listeners. If we can start with your origin story, how did you get into IT?
So yeah, hi Shiv. I'm really excited to be part of this, and it's allows me to also refresh lots of old memories. And so I was just sitting back and reflecting. I come from a very modest background, a lower middle class family, and a very small town. So even the dreams are modest because 1984, 87, the exposure was not so much. There was no internet, no television, no Netflix, no Discovery channels, and so on. So we didn't know too much of outside world, and it was a small town. So maybe one thing was sure that I wanted to do something like it should be different. It should be big. What is that big? That clarity was not there. So we thought that maybe we can become college professors or maybe go engineering college professors. That was largely the dreams. One thing for sure that you should study a lot of maths and physics because that's going to be essential. That's all I knew. And we grew up, got very good teachers from primary school onwards. They were passionate about building human resources, not just teaching and making money types. They're very fortunate. In fact, a very small incident that when my parents thought that they could not afford the fee and they wanted to put me in a government school, two teachers came to my house and saying, you can pay the fee later, don't take her out. I mean, that's unheard of in general.
Yeah.
So grew up in that environment, very nice and good people. In 1987, when I was completing my BSc in physics, chemistry, math, because we didn't have engineering college in the town, and I don't think my parents would have sent me outside at that age, and even financially, maybe they could not. So when I was finishing my BSc, around that time, we heard about this DRDO program. So computers and software was evolving. It was undergoing a sea change at that time. And DRDO realized that they needed people who not just could punch in few lines of code, but could really make software systems or no software intensive hardware systems. So they invested in a national program, which was called MSc Computer Science program. It was sponsored by DRDO. They chose 5 universities and they funded. The entrance was at a national level, so the selection ratio was, I think, 3% or something. So I was one of the first batches. Out of 1,000 students, there was a shortlisting and then finally interview, and 30 people were selected for the batch.
Okay.
And they gave 800 rupees per month as stipend to all these 30 people. That was a big deal at that time because 800 means we could survive. We need not depend on parents. And then there was a guaranteed job after that. So DRDO had a bond that you have to serve as a scientist and class 1 gazetted officer. So no, everything was very attractive. Just that after the MSc, they'll be posting in any part of the country, and that had my parents worry a bit. But eventually, all of that got resolved, and I went, and we did pretty well. Coming from a very small town, Hindi medium, and all that, did reasonably well there. I think I scored 3rd rank in the class finally. And
Even though
then,
late, congrats.
sorry.
I said, even though late, congrats.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, it was a big deal at that time.
Yeah.
There were people from Delhi and South and everywhere, and as such, we were a little low profile. Yeah, so then I was posted to Delhi from DRDO and working on computerized land war game systems. And it was following DOD 2167A lifecycle model. Okay. For software. In DRDO, software methodology or process primarily came because of LCA. LCA was a big program that DRDO had taken up. There were lots of challenges and lots of eyes were watching from all over the world. And DRDO could not have taken chances to fail. So they went a bit slow because it was a major program and the industry was not what it is today. So today we have software industry. We didn't know at that time how to make airborne computers. Industry was not there. DRDO pretty much handheld some industry and brought it up because needed support. So that time the software engineering methodology, everything came in, and even though we were not on LCA at that time, but 2167A was still followed. Another interesting part about DRDO is a holistic approach. So they send you for conferences, they send you for seminars. And in Delhi, when we were that young into software, we met Humphrey, who's from Software Engineering Institute, Carnegie Mellon. And that was a very, very impressive and very inspiring session in one conference with Humphrey, and drove us even more into software engineering. So it was like, although software engineering was very abstract, we are too young to still understand the systems concept and requirement analysis and design and everything. But still, there was something to it which was very fascinating for me. That there's much larger picture than just writing a code. Did pretty good job again there. It was for Indian Armed Forces and I got reasonable acknowledgement, etc. And that's where I met Ramesh. So it was like he was in a different lab, my husband. He was in a different lab, but we were staying in the same single officers accommodation. Okay. And one Holi, we all played, and then when we went to terrace for a community lunch, then somebody said it's Ramesh's birthday today. And I looked back saying, who's Ramesh? Because he was very, very calm and quiet. And so I knew practically everyone else there except Ramesh. But then we became friends, and he's a gem of a person. So finally decided that we're going to spend time together.
Nice.
But he was like not to be in Delhi. He hated Delhi, like majority of the South Indian people. So he took transfer. He came to Hyderabad. Then he quit DRDO. He joined a startup in Bangalore. We got married. I shifted to Bangalore after that. And I came to ADE, and I was sent to Cockpit Display Systems group of LCA, the light combat aircraft. So far, I have never opened a computer. I have not seen the motherboard. I have not seen anything inside, although the computers were good. There were SunSpark stations, and we were working on a very good software technology, like Oracle database and Sun Spark stations and X Windows, which was the happening thing at that time, and all of that. But closed boxes. And cockpit display system, the computer was an embedded system. It was an embedded system. And we see these ICs flying all around the lab, which is totally, totally new to me. And I was a bit puzzled whether I'll be able to do anything there at all. So I went to the director saying, please change my group. I don't think I'll be able to contribute. Mm-hmm. He says, either you go there or you go out of DRDO. There is no third way out. So obviously I didn't want to come out of DRDO. Stayed there, and that probably was the best thing to happen to me in life, because LCA taught everybody a lot. Not just technology, not just software engineering, but the hurdles of the major program, the interpersonal relationships, inter-organizational relationships, and all the fights that associate with it. We had some of the fantastic professionals working on the LCA group. And of course, Dr. Kota, who was Padma Shri, the program director, very inspiring. He used to literally visit all the labs. He knew us when we were very junior, even at that time, but he knew us by name and face, of course. So yes, it was very hard, because around that time, even the US government had placed sanctions on India because of the Operation Shakti, the Pokhran blast that we had done. Our scientists were overnight sent back to India from US they were not allowed to take their pen and pencil from the labs. They had to come back. Strength was anyway less, because Y2K had come up around that time. And private companies were recruiting anybody and everybody who could write 4 lines of code and paying them very, very, very well. So there were lots of scientists who had resigned from DRDO. Strength was less. Industry was not there. But eventually we all sailed through. And the best thing that happened there was, so they were 2167A again being followed. A very strict waterfall model. Lots of good advanced case tools. We had, at that time, we had a configuration management tool called PVCS. We worked with Rhapsody, we worked with Telelogic, and you have to have 100% code coverage analysis to be submitted. You can't have any part of the code which is not tested. You can't have dead code. And even so there were things like in somewhere it says that your power on self-test shall not take more than 5 seconds. So if it takes 7 seconds, it takes, and it's not a big deal. But then you had to go and rewrite the requirement that it's okay to take 7 seconds. So not to that level, people had to follow a process because risks were pretty high. Around that time, we faced one interesting problem, considering that the tests were at this level. So I was designer. Somebody is there who's test team in charge. We have a very comprehensive, independent, standalone test setup. There is an independent verification and validation team from ADA who's coming and examining all your documents. Every line of source code is gone through, etc. Then there are certification agencies. So the system passes through all of this test. We go to another level of avionics rig test, where your computer is being integrated with the rest of the avionics. And there are all these cockpit displays kept there as for next level of test. Actual INS there, actual throttle and stick there, and so on. There also, it passes. The systems pass the test. But when it is taken to the aircraft, we get a report saying that, so it was a dual standby. It was a mission critical system, dual standby computer, hot standby. So dual redundant, hot standby. One computer fails, automatically the second one will take over. The first one will do its own diagnosis and try to boot it up again, and external commands given and so on. If the second computer fails, the first one will take over if it has become healthy. Okay. If they both do not, then there is a problem. So, and the problem is because of that problem, you have to prove that your code coverage is 100% and etc. etc. The probability of both failing is extremely remote. Now, the thing which was being reported from the aircraft was that one computer fails, the second one takes over, and first one becomes all right immediately after it hands over, and it never fails again. The second computer fails occasionally again and hands over to the first computer, and whichever had failed, that recovers and never fails again as long as it's inactive. And this problem was so unique that we were not able to reproduce it in the lab. We were not able to, code analysis did not give us any clue. I was still, although I was heading the software development team, but still not very senior. So everybody doubted that she's come from a non-embedded background and whether she knows enough, etc. So external groups, external agencies, the Hyderabad lab people, everybody got involved. Code analysis did not reveal anything. Reports after reports after reports for years to get, like at least 1 year. And every high-level person in DRDO knew about this problem. Eventually, it so turned out, and it's a very, very, very good case study for distributed or federated computing. The avionics cycle was 20 milliseconds. And the avionics bus, which is 1553B, it's divided into minor cycle and major cycle. The minor cycle duration was 20 milliseconds. And every computer had internal clock, and it was divided into 20 millisecond cycles. But they're asynchronous. The clocks are asynchronous, obviously. And 20 is never 20. 20 is like 19.999 or 20.00001 or whatever. And this drift between our computer and some other computer was sometimes causing, like after a certain amount of time, which depended on when you power on our computer and when you power on the other computer.
Okay.
Depending on that, this drift would build up after a random amount of time. And there was one logic that you have to give a loopback token. Mm-hmm. If that token is not received within a certain period, then your computer will be declared as failed. So this computer was faithfully returning the token, but because of this drift buildup, it was perceived as late response, and hence it was declared as failed. The moment it hands over to the next computer, the load on this computer becomes much less. So it has nothing to do. It receives that token and returns it back. So it is perceived as recovered. Just a small thing, however, how do you debug? So you don't find it in the lab, you don't find it in the test rig, because the power on cycles were different. And in standalone testing, that computer was anyway not there. So we had to then instrument the code. We had to go to literally the processor's fault stack, the normal stack of the processor, and we would pull out all the data, write it into a non-volatile memory, bring back the hardware box to the lab, then pull out all this data, analyze it. So that cycle was pretty long, and you had to wait for the programs to do the low-speed taxi, high-speed taxi. So there were lots of dependencies, and every test cycle was very big, sometimes of the order of a month, because yours is not the only system. There are other systems, and they have their own issues. So by the time from one taxi to next taxi, there is some time required. And hence it took this long a time, and finally we could resolve it. It was a very interesting case study.
Definitely. See, I can totally relate to this because as part of my BE project, I was at NPOL. That is the Naval Oceanographic Lab in Kochi.
Yes.
And I land there. And then so I was told that this is going to be your manager and do that. So he says, I want you to build a clock. I said, what's the big deal? I'm a BE student, what will I do and all that. Then he said, no, this is something that you have to build on. They were trying to create a bit slice processor based clock, which means that you can keep on adding more and more bits and then make it more complex. He said, how big can it be? Probably it's a 1 week job for me. And the entire 3 months I was there, slowly I learned the importance of the clock synchronization across. The moment you distribute it, what works together, suddenly behaves very differently.
Yes.
I guess they behave the way they are meant to behave, but then we don't anticipate some of these things. Yeah, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So literally, so we have this assessments for promotion. And for my, I think, C to D promotion, which was 4 years span, half of my slides were on this problem only, because that's what we had done for half the time, pretty much. So yes, I mean, no, we also learned that what we take for granted, that 20 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds is never really 20 or never really 40. So it was good. And of course, there were other challenges in the sense that our displays had to be refreshed. So you have to refresh there was a head-up display, which was a very unique, novel thing at that time. Now, of course, it is relatively more common. So these are transparent displays which reflect certain wavelength of light and transmit all of the other wavelengths. So you project your symbology on it with that particular wavelength, and rest of it comes from outside. So the pilot is able to see the outside world and also see the symbology, which is very crucial for him for flying, without taking his eyes off to see the other displays. So like when he is into deep, let's say, combat, at that time, he wants to see all the flight critical parameters right in front of him. So this thing had to be refreshed at 20 milliseconds. There were other multifunction displays. So LCA has a glass cockpit, which means that all those electromechanical dials, etc., are not there. There's hardly any hardly any backup instrument there, except very, very crucial. So all the engine parameters, the attitude parameters, fuel parameters, everything comes on a computer-driven displays. So they were all there, and they had to be displayed at 40 milliseconds refresh rate. And you can't redesign your hardware every now and then. The hardware is not COTS because of size constraints and certifiability constraints and so on. So you are stuck with whatever memory is available, whatever processor speed is available. So we had to optimize to very, very great detail to, initially the first version went through without any issue, but then requirements keep growing, newer systems come, you have to display that parameter on the cockpit display only, so display processor has to process it. So slowly the requirements grew, the complexities grew, and then we realized that we had to literally disassemble the code, look at the assembly instructions and say that, okay, this instruction takes 32 cycles, so what can you replace it with? Something else which takes 62 clock cycle, or 16 clock cycles, or 8 clock cycles. All the floating point operations, how can you change to integer to make sure that you're able to meet that constraint? So it was a very, very different kind of an experience at that time. And we had to document all of these utilities, which are offline. Like, offline, we would convert some software into assembly language and port it. Even that has to be tested and certified. So you have to generate all the life cycle documents for that as well and stuff like that. So that was very interesting, very challenging. Eventually, one is that, as I said, the cockpit displays are the pilot's prime means of information. He doesn't have anything else. So the processing requirements started growing quite a bit. And it was also realized that the majority of the traffic was between the mission computer and the display processor. So they decided, and the avionics architecture was at that time shifting from federated to modular avionics. Okay. So instead of computers, you have processing boards now. So you keep whatever is heavy traffic exchange computers, you keep them in a single box with the motherboard being you communicate via the motherboard rather than the avionics bus. So eventually the program decided that these two have to be combined. We handed over all the hardware, software, everything to ADA. And then I was shifted to the UAV group in AD. So I was heading what was called the payload data processing group. Totally different from anything else that I had done so far. So I had, this was slightly unique that I had to shift from what I did in Delhi to LCA to UAV and that to payload data processing. That time I did express a little bit of displeasure over my luck that people, they do the same thing for 30, 40 years and become expert in it. And I had to shift. And during this time, I also registered for my master's when LCA pressure had slightly lowered down. I registered for my master's in IISc. And there my professor says that don't do your office work in institute, in the sense that it can't be the same work. So because he says, when I publish papers, DRDO will come and say it's sensitive, or some of your colleague might come and say this was my work and she has published. No, he didn't want to get into any of it. Again, he's a very big inspiration. He's Padma Shri Professor Balakrishnan, very big name, and very close to Dr. Abdul Kalam and all of that. And a taskmaster. I mean, he will help you in all the administrative formalities, etc. But when it comes to work, there are hardly any concessions given.
Yeah.
So there, my work was
I
totally
remember
different.
Balki. I was also an ISC alumnus. Yeah.
Oh, you know Valki, yeah.
Friendly, yeah.
Yes. So then it happens that in IIC you're working on sensor networks, which is totally different thing. And sensor networks was another thing which was just coming up at that time. So from there, the IoT has evolved. From wireless sensor networks, the IoT has evolved. So I got into IIC just when the sensor networks had started, the papers had started becoming popular on that. So nice, but yes, I had challenges because you're working full time, and then IIC and family you tend to ignore in the process. You just take them for granted kinds. I've been lucky. Family has been very, very supportive. So that way it was good. So I moved to UAVs. There it was more of, it was a ground-based system, and they were following MIL standard 498, which, so 2167A, as you may be knowing, had a very strong waterfall bias, waterfall process bias. Although nowhere it says that it is so, but when you start interpreting it, you find it hard to correlate it with the iterative methods or agile or anything else. Similarly, it was very strongly biased towards structured methodology. I mean, which is what was there at that time. So you have this hierarchical decomposition. You have the CSCIs and then broken down into CSCs, broken down into CSUs, and unit testing and then integration testing, and also very strongly biased towards that. Very elaborate, very good at that time, but then things were changing. So this also had to change. So these people were following 498, the UAV group, and there things were a lot more different in the sense that now you can have a unit which need not be a software code unit. It can be database. It can be something else. Reusability concept was promoted. Database was promoted. You can have informal reviews. You can have informal records. It doesn't have to be in the form of a documentation. Very, very different. But what I noticed at that time, and what I also read later, was that it allowed so much of liberty that people took a lot more liberty, and then things started getting diluted and mistakes started happening.
Okay. So
I typically give this example that you have a two-way road, and in between there is a hard divider. So you can only, upstream can only go on the left side and downstream can only come on the right side. Even though, let's say in the morning, right side is pretty much free because everybody is going out. And while coming back, it's the other way around. There is a free space, but you can't make use of it. I call 2167A something like that. 498 in contrast was that you have a dotted line, that dashed line, that when you have the other side free, you can make use of it, or you can make use of it for overtaking, but not otherwise. However, like happens in Indian situation, people don't bother about what's coming. They just go and accidents happen. So then came this IEEE 12207, ISO 12207, which had something like a midway. So they have drawn this yellow lines, and in between certain places where you can overtake, but not really go on the other side. So then slowly people started moving towards 12207, and I had a pretty long share with 12207 as well. I had got a chance to study all of that. And image processing, computer vision, artificial intelligence, which was kind of evolving at that time. You did not have OpenCV, TensorFlow was not so much there, etc. So we were still sitting and writing. I remember that our people were still sitting and writing mosaicing code, literally going pixel by pixels, extracting features, matching descriptors, and all of that. And yes, so our one UAV was inducted into Indian Army. The other ones were getting made. So all that was happening on one side. The more interesting thing which happened, me being in that chair was that there was this program called Special Interest Group on Micro Air Vehicles. It's not strictly DRDO. It is what is called Aeronautics R&D Board, which is owned by MOD. DRDO is more like a custodian for funds and all of that for that. So I was made a convener of that group.
Okay.
Because fait accompli, they felt that compared to other groups in UAV, this group was relatively less loaded, is what was their perception. So they gave me these other tasks. This group, the Sigma, was basically, it would invite proposals from academic institutes and other R&D institutes related to micro air vehicles on any discipline. You can have structures, flight controls, ground control station, vision-based landing, vision-based navigation, anything and everything related to micro air. Even we had things like artificial nose, electronic nose. And so NAL was working on that and they did succeed. I mean, it was, I don't know, in near future, we may not be able to make a generic one, but it could sense certain sensitive chemicals, which are used for this making bombs or other weapons. So that was one very interesting exposure. One thing which I remember very distinctly, and like all of us were this was a committee. It was an interdisciplinary committee, and I was convener come special member for vision and so on. So once one academician from one of these remote universities or colleges, he came and he literally showed us slides. So people were studying perching at that time, how birds perch on wires. Electric wires and other thin railings and all that, because we wanted to mimic that for making micro air vehicles. Yeah. So this guy had literally chopped off the feet of one bird. He was showing us the picture of that, and he was saying, I'll attach an artificial perching mechanism to it. And we were like so shocked. He said, you don't have to do that. So had all kinds of interesting experiences during that time. And General Vijay Sundaram, Lieutenant General Sundaram, who's now retired, of course, long back. He's I think 80 plus now. He was director of DRDO, I think so, Hyderabad. Then after that also he stayed associated, and he was the chairman of this group. Okay. Extremely passionate about this technology, and he was very, very, very strongly pursuing the cyborgs case, saying that we should have. So he had studied that you can do beetles, you can inject some synthetic stimuli to them. And when you give a small electric current, they can turn on one side. When you give small electric current on the other side, they turn on the other side. And the beetles, he says, they grow very easily in India, and they can carry, I think, 10 times their weight. So his dream was that we should carry these beetles to, when we have these natural calamities like earthquakes or tsunamis or floods or whatever. At that time, when people are buried under debris, you can't fly a micro air vehicle there. So beetles are the ones which you can have a very small IR sensor on them and very small microphone. So if somebody is breathing or crying for help, or just the fact that he's alive, that temperature, that can give you vital clue, and then you can go there. So he was pursuing that very, very seriously. Then there was another program jointly initiated by DRDO and DST, which was called National Program on Micro Air Vehicles. So Sigma was like a long-term building up the capabilities in the country kind of a concept. NP-MICA was more program-oriented. So 5 years, you must develop certain technologies, and because India felt that we need to leapfrog into these technologies. If you do it good slow space, other countries will take over significantly. So this was a program which was again sponsored by DRDO and DST, and I was a member even there. And we conducted competitions at national level for the MAVs have to go inside a building and take pictures of people, identify people, come out. So if it's a hijack kind of a situation, How can we send? So very interesting work done by people at that time. Jain University and NAL, IISc. So DRDO gave me that chance to practically visit any institute of national importance. So it was a very good exposure, including I got a chance to visit MIT, Georgia Tech, and US Air Force Research Lab. Got to do a course in Cranfield University Defense Campus on electro-optic imaging systems for defense. So that way it was a very good stint. But eventually I just felt that as you grow, you are expected to do a lot more managerial and administrative stuff than actual hands-on technical work. So I felt wanted to come out. So I took voluntary retirement, registered a company. Honestly, I had no clue at that time what I was going to do. Just that, let's see, thankfully financially, I could take that risk because of Ramesh being there, and I'm getting my pension, so the risks are lowered. I got a chance to work with Tata Advanced Systems at that time. So I had just registered the company and I got this call from, of course, I mean, through a known person. He introduced me there, and they asked for my resume, and then they said, okay, we'll take a chance, 1 year consultancy. Again, they have some aerial surveillance systems, and they were also in the smaller mini micro air vehicles, etc. Again, lots of standard driven work. So you have standards for interoperability of ground control stations, standards for how you disseminate the information that is obtained from the surveillance platforms. So there are international standards. The only difference between standards in 1987 and now is that time defense was the major driver of all these standards and electronics and software and everything. Now it is the other way around. All the industry is doing a lot of R&D. Defense budgets are very going lower, and they don't have enough manpower, not just in India, all over. So now there's a lot of research is happening, and standardization also, there is a very big incentive for industry to come up with interoperability, because you're using Samsung phones and iPhones, and you want to ensure that the data is, you're able to talk to each other and stuff like that. So now when I look at some of those NATO standards for interoperability, or this data recording, so when I say data, it's basically all the videos, images, electronic intelligence, human intelligence, everything. How do you encode them? How do you transmit them? How do you store them, retrieve them, etc.? Pretty much everything is being leveraged from the commercial world, except that they take care of all those encryptions and coding and whatever stuff, etc. So there it was, again, of course, DO 278 for ground systems, DO 178 for airborne systems, interoperability, airworthiness standards, safety standards. So a very interesting experience there as well. I worked there for 18 months. But what happened was I had the company at least registered. There were a couple of engineers, one engineer from the beginning, others I used to take some interns, but so they were there. But I was not able to do justice. You can't do justice to two things wholeheartedly. So slowly my involvement with Tatas became a lot, and these people were feeling disoriented. Okay. And I felt that it was unfair on them as well. So I must decide, either I close this down or I quit the other part. So for good or bad, I took a decision that I'm going to focus on the company for some time. So right now, that's what I'm doing. Initially, it took me some time to explore the market and where I should pitch in. Did some 3-4 small projects, currently doing one mid-sized project, which is a SaaS platform, but the entire platform is not from us. There is some contribution in the platform, but there is an AI backend. AI and rule-based logic backend, OCR and form parsing and all of that. Okay. That I'm doing. We also have been declared lowest bidder for one of the DRDO projects.
Oh, nice.
Which is again doing something to do with the UAV images and satellite images and geo-registration and all that. It's a very challenging and long project. yeah, so that's in the nutshell that I've been doing.
And it's very exciting. It truly rocket science type of things. So there's one question which I wanted to ask, and later on when you mentioned and the use of more of commercial standards and software, it kind of fits in. See, normally in the commercial world, and this is again one of those terminologies or terms that we've been using, is that we say whatever the software does, we say is functional requirements.
Yes.
And anything else, we call it as non-functional requirements. And then the way you describe things about when you talked about the clock and synchronization, the performance, the encryption, all that, how is this focus on the non-functional requirements, for lack of a different word, and the need for, when you talked about cockpit systems, understanding cognition or making sure that when you said it's all glass, and then they need to make sure that they don't get distracted and all that. How do you kind of blend disciplines when you are either formulating the solution or implementing solutions?
Yes, so yeah, very valid questions. Before just stepping a little bit back, in 2167A, the distinction between requirement and design was strictly what and how. But slowly it was realized that in 498 and even 12207 was that anything that this customer cares for is a requirement. Anything, it could be what or how. Anything that he doesn't care, like, no, you are achieving your goal, how, or if you have to do some what, because of just to make the system complete, that's a design decision. And so next step from there is non-functional requirements. They are, yes, equally important. So when we write software requirement specifications, the functional requirements pretty much come from the user's written down requirements. And then obviously the wise people all sit together, including the user sometimes, just to ensure that he doesn't have any strong say on any of the other non-functional requirements. And they are also given, if that was your question, they are also assigned unique IDs. The way the functional requirements are assigned unique IDs, non-functional requirements are also assigned unique IDs, and they are traced throughout. So if there is a non-functional requirement that has an impact on the functional requirement, it goes through that series of review, that what can be changed and what cannot be changed and so on. So yes, non-functional requirements are equally important. They have to be traced, they have to be tested and verified for functionality. Coming back to your second question, you spoke about interdisciplinary or I mean, that was your question, right? Because they were
complementary. These are the standards and processes you follow, but the people who need to do that, now we talk about left brain, right brain thinking and all that, which means now how do you blend somebody who's a very detail oriented person, probably likes to write just algorithms, saying that anything that is displayed is all, I mean, probably just the periphery. Or somebody else who says, I'm a user experience person, understanding behavior, understanding the environment, the context in which something is used. So when you either build a team, is it typically people with different skills, or do you have, or do people who work on these kind of solutions have to have both kind of experiences and expertise?
Yeah, no, it was more of the first part.
Okay.
That no, there are DRDO also evolved, the way internationally every organization was evolving. So typically you may have one kind of an organizational structure, but eventually you feel that a matrix structure works best. So for example, let's say you're working on 4 systems and all the 4 need expertise in flight control. All the 4 needs expertise in structure. So you have 2 people or 10 people team, who are good in structures or who are good in flight controls, or no, they're specialized. In fact, they are even trained. So DRDO also trains people for any specific requirement. So this was a matrix organization where the project offices are on one side and the technology divisions are on other side. And of course, there are meetings where everybody's view is heard, that how, if you want to meet this requirement, if this change has to be made, is it likely to have an impact on the other systems? So periodically these issues are resolved, recorded. Lately, so I should not say lately, pretty much, so it was Dr. Kota and Professor Sudhakar of IIT Bombay. All of these people were very strong promoters of what is called multidisciplinary optimization, MDO. So they started this study, and of course DRDO works very closely with all the academic institutes. So when it comes to core algorithms, there are scientists in DRDO who are good, but they also take help from, let's say, IISCs or IITs and NIT and all of that. There are lots of provisions to engage with academic institutes at lab level, at organization level, and all that. So yes, to answer your question, algorithms, there are core teams and there are academic institutes and other organizations. Within DRDO, they have these technology groups and project divisions. It so happens that there are people who are cross-functional or cross-domain, but they're sitting in one place. If the organization knows that he is also strong in some discipline, then his view may be heard a little bit more strongly. As it should happen.
I didn't realize how long we have been talking. So we still have some time. At least one question, one of my favorite questions, I guess, is for people who are considering a career in IT or people who are mid-career who want to know whether I should do this or that. Primarily, the dilemma is, should I remain technical or should I get into managerial? Now, in your case, also taking into account defense as an area of career when somebody wants to get in fresh, what kind of future do you see? And of course, mid-career, since you made a choice, you didn't want much of the paperwork and then wanted to be more technical. Any thoughts or inputs that you can share?
Yeah. So no, I totally believe that it's no. It depends on the person involved. In fact, I consider not being able to do certain things as my weakness. It requires a huge perseverance and skill to be a project manager. You need to drive people, you need to, no, so I take typical example of Dr. Kota Harinarayana, the way he managed at national level, different organizations, and some people are very tough. No, it takes a lot to move them. And there are organizations who are, I don't say that they're not good, but it's just that maybe their priorities are different. To ensure that they meet your project timelines and no, they don't get digressed into what is more important for their own organization, or it requires a huge amount of people skill. Probably I didn't have that. So I'm not saying that that's good or bad or anything at all. Some people are meant for that. Some people are not meant for that. Probably I was not meant that way. Unless you are at a project manager level, in most of the organizations, so I'm not saying this as a complaint because I had my share of recognition in DRDO. I got some awards, and Dr. Kota knows me today by name and face. So that itself is a big achievement. No? But you get real satisfaction of being able to get something done only when you are in a project management level. Technology sometimes can be overruled. You may have great ideas, but if somebody doesn't feel that it fits into the program, no, it may not be taken and things like that. So there are, but I guess it happens both ways, sometimes good, sometimes bad. For people who are young, I have one very serious, I should not say complaint, but I don't know, you hear it and then you decide what to call it.
Expectation.
No, so the problem at our generation was that we did not have information, we did not have exposure, we didn't know what to do. But today, the problem is that the exposure is so much that many people are totally confused and they don't know what to do. Even when they come to me, like in my company, they feel that when they want to do computer vision, it's only writing 2 lines of OpenCV code that will give them the next job. They do not want to do a system thing where you have to make a system. Like I keep telling them, you can't take your laptop and put it in the car and take the camera feed and tell you that this is the road. Mm-hmm. You have to make a system which will also have to be ruggedized, which will also have to be made real time. You'll also have to ensure that it works in various environmental conditions, weather conditions. Nobody seems to have patience for that. Mm-hmm. And they train one model, they're ultra excited because now they can write 2 extra lines on their resume. I don't blame them. It's probably because of the way the environment is getting created. There is a lot of fog. There's a lot of fog. And somewhere I think we should take initiative to clear up that fog, give the right orientation to these kids, and even educational institutes. That even many of the institutes don't know today what is really required in the industry. And I do believe that now the time has come to, like, computer science was never a subject until 85, 86, 87. It was all electrical engineering, ECE, all of that. It grew after that. Today, I think the time has come when computer science needs to split. It's no longer one subject. So we need to have specialists, but then very sound, deep specialists in various areas. So that's my opinion on that.
I think that's about all the time we have for this conversation, but I have a lot more questions. I'm sure I've also been trying to reach out to Ramesh also to talk. Okay, let's see how far I get with that.
Sure, certainly. Certainly.
I'm sure that there are more topics that we'll probably catch up. I would definitely like to have a follow-on conversation some after maybe a few months.
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Neeta, and all the best for your
Thank you, Shiv. I mean, very interesting to know about your work. I was looking up some time back, and it was a very interesting experience for me as well, recalling all of the old work.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.